The following is a presentation of KSL Sports. First and 12. A total roundup of BYU and Utah football and the expanded Big 12 Conference. Brought to you by Macy's Grocery Stores. Your hosts are Mitch Harper and Alex Kirry on KSL News Radio and the KSL Sports Zone.
And a happy Sunday to you. Welcome on in. It is a special edition of First and 12 this weekend. Alex Kirry, Mitch Harper coming together on a pre-rivalry week edition of the program. And yes, both teams have a bye this week. You know, that means not a lot of games to break down, but nonetheless, this is one of the most exciting times that we've had in a long time. If you're following BYU, if you're following Utah, BYU, of course, because of its magical season that they've had so far. Mitch Harper, BYU insider for KSLSports.com, of course, on the other end of the ether. Mitch, it's been a wild season. I want to just get your thoughts on what it's been like covering this team so far. 8-0 right now, number 9 in the AP poll. The first college football playoff projections or playoff rankings, not projections. The actual first playoff rankings come out this week, and It's been a wild one to be able to cover, man. It must be awesome to be able to be inside those locker rooms and follow it all.
It has been, and any thought of what BYU has been in the past has not applied to this team. The day game thing, the 2 time zones, or going on the road, hostile environments. They just always pass with flying colors. Letdown game in a day spot at home, national spotlights growing. They just continue to pass with flying colors, and they're doing it with Jake Retzlaff, and it's still kind of surreal to think that's happened to where, 2 months ago at this time, a lot of people, including myself, were very, questioning of Jake Retzlaff, what his ceiling was. I mean, I thought the ceiling for this team was 6-6 with Jake Retzlaff or Gary Bohannon. And for them to be 8-0 and the best team in the Big 12 Conference heading into the rivalry game, it's just very surreal. But yes, it's been a lot of fun, and it's been a team that's had a little bit of an edge. They were salty in the first month of the season. That's kind of died down, at least with the media, but still they've got this chip on the shoulder where they feel like no one believes in them, and it's leading to now this rivalry game where they have another chance to continue to elevate their profile.
So one thing that happened that's interesting this week, you brought up Jake Retzlaff, and frankly, it is funny for me, and you and I have this discussion all the time, all the people who come out of the woodwork like, I can't believe – JJ and I got accused this week, like, remember when JJ and Alex said before the season they can't believe that BYU hasn't named a starter? You sound kind of dumb right now, don't you? I'm going, no, why didn't they name the starter if they knew he was going to be this good? There's no freaking way they would have waited to announce the starter. I think that's two things that happen. It shows you how Jake Retzlaff, like, that competition was legit. Like, between he and Gary Bohannon, it was close enough. And they pushed each other enough. They probably both got really freaking good. You got to give some credit to the fact that Gary Bohannon probably pushed Jake Retzlaff, and they both probably got better during all that. And so BYU's got a great starting quarterback right now, and they probably have a pretty darn good backup, even though we haven't seen Gary. That was a legit quarterback controversy. So everybody acting like they knew how this thing was going to go is insane to me. But that's just my thought.
It's so true, though, because if there was – a clear feeling of Jake Retzlaff is the future. He's QB1. They would have toted him around Big 12 media days. They would have had him everywhere in the spotlight. But
doing what they're doing now, by the way, with him,
right.
Just being on everything.
Yes, whereas they were not amplifying his story of his path to BYU in the preseason because it wasn't clear that he was going to be in this spot. And even after week 2, after SMU where they win 18-15, you're thinking, okay, you got to win, but – and remember, SMU looked really bad against Nevada in week 0, and you're thinking, how good of a win was that? And, everything's just kind of worked out for BYU, and they've just gotten better and better and better, and it just continues to be a snowball effect, and Jake's playing with incredible confidence right now, and this BYU team is just flying high to where they now go into this rivalry game coming up this Saturday, and it feels like they should win decisively potentially, but we know these rivalry, the history of this thing, anything can happen, but it's a wild turn of events what's happened this season.
I did want to play for you too. Speaking of Jake Retzlaff doing the media tour this week, of course, I know that these guys. I know that the team, what they say, Kalani's message is, well, no one was talking about us in August, and now suddenly they're asking us all these questions. Like, well, you can understand why people might have been a little bit gun shy about the whole thing. How BYU was going to do. We knew how good we were. I don't think anybody, even inside that locker room, thought that they were 8-0 good, but they certainly take it game by game. And Jake Retzlaff was on the Jim Rome show this week, and I grabbed a little chunk of what he said to Jim Rome as he's been a little bit in the spotlight. Here's BYU's quarterback Jake Retzlaff on Jim Rome's national show.
Dude, it was this offseason, man. We had a feeling in this building that we knew that nobody knew what was going to go on here in Provo. So, I mean, just winter workouts, spring ball, leading into the summer training and the fall camp, man. There was the feeling all along that we had the type of urgency and we had the type of team that can do something special this year.
We're talking to Jake Retzlaff. Jake, looking back, it's kind of hard to imagine. Like, you knew that, but outside the building, obviously, it was not well known because the media picked BYU to finish 13th in the preseason Big 12 media poll. It tells you what we media scrubs know or don't know. Like, what did the voters not know about this team that they should have known?
Just the way this team plays together, the way we play for each other, the chemistry here, the culture here, I believe is second to none. Coach Kalani has set a standard, and the guys meet it every single day. It's one of those things that's a little bit intangible. It's hard to really put a finger on what it is that brings this team across the finish line each week. But, we do a good job playing together, man. The love for this team is second to none, and the urgency this offseason was at an all-time high. And I don't think anybody knew that we were acting as urgent as we were. I don't think any of those media members actually showed up to practices and watched us play or anything. They just kind of based us off of last year. And last year obviously wasn't the year we wanted it to be, but with 50, 60 new guys in the building, we kind of, got through last season as the new team in the Big 12. And now we're a team, we're a unit that's united.
So, Mitch, I was going to run it past you. I can't believe you wouldn't go to those practices, man. I just love this whole I couldn't put my finger on it, what it is about this team is because there's actually I'm convinced that we actually don't know the exact answer. There's a lot that is added up to be where this team is right now. Just like there's a lot that's added up to where Utah is where they are right now. The story of every season ends up unfolding, and it's very rare that we have this type of disparity of where the expectations are or as to what we think that the talent level is with these teams. And BYU obviously going 8-0 was a shock, but Utah losing the last 4 games in a row, being in the spot that they are is equally, it might actually be a little bit more shocking than what BYU has been going through this season. I don't know where you put it, but I mean, like, it's equally as strange to see Utah in the spot that they are, to see BYU achieving at the level that they are.
Yeah, it's shocking, and that shock value was amplified when they lost to Houston because, Utah's got talent, and there's no shortage of that. But it's just when you hear from Jake Retzlaff the culture piece, and you thought Utah's culture was dialed in too, but maybe some new faces in key spots, has rattled the culture a little bit. I don't know. Is it solely the transition to the Big 12? I wish I had a clear understanding because I do feel like in the trenches, Utah still got really good talent, but the offensive line hasn't lived up to expectations. Defense is still stout, but they lack the playmakers on the offensive side right now that consistently contribute outside of Mekhi Bernard. And when it's just, kind of a one-man band, it's just not going to lead to much success. You got to be versatile, and you got to have the playmakers, especially at quarterback, and that's where things have really went south for Utah. Whereas I thought that quarterback unit for Utah was going to be incredibly deep. It's not, and it really hung on Cam Rising, and it feels like their season kind of went out the door a little bit. At least the expectations of playoff and a Big 12 title went out the door when he went down. And look, they can now play spoiler, but I don't feel like this is not. Like, this is reverting back to Utah of the 90s, of the 80s, where it was spoiling BYU seasons, and no Utah fan wants to talk like that because they feel like that was a distant memory, and they've moved on from that side of things of trying to play spoiler for BYU. So just spoiling BYU's season won't be enough to salvage, I think, this season that had such high aspirations, to the point where even Kyle Whittingham was talking in the preseason about this team's pretty loaded.
What is the underlying issue, do you think, at Utah? I mean, there's the offensive woes. I think that this is actually something that's been coming for a while, and I think it was covered up by a lot of the the play that Cam Rising was, contributing during his, the stretch of him being really, really good. You were kind of like, hey, man, this guy's really awesome, and he's a Kyle Whittingham guy. He plays a certain way, the type of player that Kyle Whittingham loves. And I think that some of it got covered up. I mean, the reality is that the NIL money that was thrown at him and the hurt feelings that go along with that. And by the way, we've heard rumblings of NIL money and what is and is not being paid to players after they were told that maybe they would get it. I mean, that's the mess of where we are with college football. But the whole Cam Rising episode and the soap opera that it's been this year, and now even the crazy thing is this week after they announced that Money Parks would be out for the rest of the season and that Cam Rising was having surgery this week, and they still haven't talked at length really with Cam about the possibility of him coming back for an 8th season. Like, Utah fans should be absolutely beside themselves going, run away as fast as you can. You have to move on from that situation. And I think it's just been a pall over the program, that entire thing. It's weird because the guy that's brought you so much success, now whatever the thing is that's been revolving around him and his injuries and the NIL money and everything that goes on behind the scenes has actually, I think, contributed to the crash that has happened this year with this Utah team.
It's a good point. And it, I'm surprised that Utah felt like a team that was just built on one guy, because it just felt like they had way much more than that. But, rivalries bring out, some crazy, unexpected results, and maybe, Utah can salvage this season. But I think what makes this difficult, even if they defeated BYU and sprung an upset, is that Kyle Whittingham is nearing the end. I mean, he said as much in July when, it was about that Miami-Utah game in 2027. He's like, I'm not going to be the head coach. So he kind of gave us an unofficial timeline of when he's, going to be hanging it up. And it's now clear that Morgan Scalley's the coach in waiting now for the Utes. And you thought the one missing piece on Whittingham's resume is a playoff appearance. And you thought with the 12-team playoff being created, that was going to be motivation, despite a conference change that probably they didn't want to go to. That was going to be enough motivation to say, okay, we got to break through. We got a perfect chance to break free, and they just haven't. And they stumbled out of the gate because the team was just built on one guy, and that was not a recipe for success. Right. And it leads to Ludwig being ousted and gone, and it's just
even like Bajakian, Mike Bajakian comes in as the interim, and they're like, hey, so what's going to happen this week? Like, what are some things you want to immediately change? Yeah. Well, the system is the system. And
that was concerning.
The system is the system, but that's the system that everyone hates right now, and it's a system that's not working. So what's going on? And then to take that loss at Houston, I mean, that's a bad – dude,
terrible.
Mitch, that's an awful Houston team. Like, that team does not even know what they're doing. And the reality is, yeah, they got athletes on the team, but what a mess to go down there and lose to a team that has no business beating Utah, like, for the next decade. The reality is that Houston team has no business being on that field with Utah, and they freaking beat them because that team is such a mess right now. That is it's an awful place to be in as a Utah fan because they have not felt this in a long time. And yeah, welcome to the way that BYU fans have felt over a long period of time, which is watching the other team in your state perform exceedingly well and overachieve and be in the national spotlight and be talked about, and then people are going, so what's you guys' problem, right? And so that's an awful place to be. Let's take our first break. We'll come back. It is 1st and 12, 97.5 the KSL Sports Zone, and also KSL News Radio. You can hear it right here every week. You can also download the podcast. When we come back, let's listen to some of the things that Kyle Whittingham said during his bye-week press conference and kind of where this team is, and we'll see if they can kind of get things right. But you've got a couple of weeks, or less than a week now, running up till BYU and Utah fire up as conference mates for the first time in a long time. We've got tons to talk about. Stay right here with us. It's all brought to you by Macy's. Of course, the freshest fruits and vegetables and your local favorite brands. It's all at Macy's. Happy shopping. They bring you 1st and 12. We're going to take a break here. More to go right here. 97.5 the KSL Sports Zone and KSL News Radio.
Read all the stories about BYU sports no one else has heard. Go to KSLSports.com for exclusive columns by BYU insider Mitch Harper. That's KSLSports.com.
Happy Sunday. Welcome on in to 1st and 12. Mitch Harper, Alex Kirry with you. We're getting ready for BYU Utah. The rivalry game is back in the Big 12 era. The two teams took the weekend off. They had a bye week, so it's all eyes towards the rivalry game this Saturday, 8:15 kick late night at Rice-Eccles Stadium. Mitch Harper and Alex here will have you covered on the various platforms, KSLSports.com, the KSL Sports Zone, KSL News Radio.
Bro, that's gonna be a long.
Tons of coverage.
That's gonna be a
game
long. That's gonna be a long Saturday, brother. Because we're gonna.
There's
gonna be because you'll be doing your stuff for KSL News Radio. We kind of break up during the day. You go do the KSL News Radio stuff and the KSLSports.com. I do I get on the zone with Hatch and we do our pre and post game. By the time post game's over, and by the time we all match up, I'm assuming we're not getting to bed till 4 a.m. on Sunday morning. So
yeah,
I'm ready for it. But listen, this is what we signed up for. Not only that, like this is what we've been begging for. These two teams playing against one another.
Yes.
We were trying to guess on the time it was going to kick. I was shocked it was the 8:30 kick. I mean, I was kind of
was
pissed
stunned too.
I couldn't believe it. I was like, why would you do this to us, Mark? And I guess we could blame Utah for not playing well enough. Maybe that's part of it.
Well, and the biggest thing is that ESPN has first pick in the Big 12, and I'm curious to see what happens next year when the TV contract shakes up. But like with ESPN probably wanting to keep the game, but the ESPN networks, they value the SEC first, so they put the SEC teams in prime time and the early spots. So they don't want to lose BYU Utah because they know that's a good late night spot. So late night it is, and it's just a bummer because. Well, why is this game being played on November 9th then if it's an 8:15 after dark? If you're going to play it on November 9th, you better put it in a spot where the rest of the country is going to watch it. So that was disappointing, but nonetheless, we're used to those work schedules with that. And a guy that's definitely used to that late night schedule is Utah head coach Kyle Whittingham. This was his bye-week comments as they get ready for the Cougs coming up a little bit later.
Yeah, we're going to evaluate this week, and there's two guys in the running, obviously, Brandon Rose and Isaac Wilson, and they're taking equal reps this week, and we'll see where it goes from there.
Would your decision have changed if maybe those field goals went in with Isaac, or was there still kind of?
That's tough to say. I don't know if those field goals would have went in, would Houston have done something different?
Sure.
I mean, it's impossible to go back and try to piece all that together. But no, we would not. Just as the circumstances were, we would not have done anything different.
Do you feel injury played a role in Isaac's kind of decline in play?
He's been pretty banged up this year, but he's a tough kid, wants to be out there, and so if you're out there, you got to perform.
How about Money? How's he doing?
Money's gone for the season. Yeah, it's a season-ending injury, so feel bad for Money. He's been with us for a lot of years and done a lot of good things, but he is out for the rest of the year.
Have you been able to pinpoint what has been going on with the offensive line struggles, or is it going to be?
Well, a lot of the time we're holding the ball too long with the quarterback, so that's part of it. When you look at, there's some metrics, Pro Football Focus say we have the most efficient O-line in the conference. So, I don't know how you measure it all exactly, but I know that we're getting some really good play out of some guys, particularly those tackles, Caleb and Spencer in particular. And we just got to keep coaching, keep working. But the offensive line has been a little bit up and down, but mostly up this year.
Mackay said after the game that he knows what the struggles are, but he didn't want to say what it was. Have you been able to pinpoint kind of what your guys' root of the struggles have been?
Well, in this past game, we didn't run the ball well enough. We didn't defend the run well enough. We lost the turnover margin, again, which has been a theme for this year. Left some points out there by missing a couple field goals. So it was a combination of 4 or 5 things that we didn't do as well as we could have.
With the bye week, how does that help Jake in and the plan with him with the offense?
Well, it gives him a little bit of time to prepare. Last week was such a crunch that there was not a lot of opportunity to tweak things or put much of his stamp on it. But with the bye week, you have a little more opportunity to do that. So that's a positive in that respect.
If you guys got opportunities that haven't gotten much run this season, what did Jalen Glover and other guys like that, what did you make of their performance?
Jalen played very well. He made the most of his carries, didn't get a ton of carries, but the carries that he did get, he maximized. And he had a really good practice today as well.
Looking ahead to your next opponent, how does it kind of change the dynamic having that game in a league play again?
It doesn't. It's another game. And whether we're in the same league or not, all it does is have implications in the conference standings. Now we know we don't have a shot at obviously at the conference championship, but otherwise you approach it the same way.
You're at a point now with 4 games left in the season. Are there any other players that maybe haven't played that you could still redshirt in these last 4 games?
Yeah, we're looking at that. There's probably half a dozen of those guys that are in that situation that we're monitoring, and tried to keep them under that not under the 4, but under the 5-game threshold.
Kyle, would a win in 2 weeks over BYU change the trajectory of your season or of your confidence in your team?
Say that again?
Would a win over BYU in 2 weeks change the trajectory of the season or the confidence of your team?
Oh, it'd be a big help. Yeah, obviously. I mean, it's we're in desperate need of a win. There's no doubt about that. We've had four in a row now, and I think the average margin's about a touchdown in every game. And so it's it's not like we're not competing. Our guys are playing hard. They're practicing well. Today was one of our best practices. There's just things that we've got to get better at, and particularly on the offensive side of the ball.
Where's the process at with Cam and potentially him coming back for an 8th year?
That's totally in Cam's court. The ball's in his court, and he is looking at a surgery next week, most likely. And so he's got time to think about that and decide what he wants to do. And you have to ask him to, if he wants to shed any light on that.
Mitch, I think you can answer questions, but I don't think that means you have the answers to the questions. You know what I mean? Like you can say some stuff, and I think Kyle Whittingham is at a loss right now. I think a lot of people in that Utah program will say, well, we need to do X, Y, and Z better. And I think the reality is that putting your finger on what the exact problem is, it's easy to say, well, it's quarterback play right now, and I think that's a lot of it, right? But it's more complicated than that. There's something culturally going on at Utah that we haven't seen in a minute, right? Where it just seems like it's not just the poor play. It's also kind of an aspect of the team that they haven't seen very much of, which is they're not playing as a team very well. And the defense is good, and you can't really tell because these outputs on offense have been so abysmal. And it's a hard one to try to cover up for Kyle Whittingham. Later on in the program, we're going to be able to hear from Mekhi Bernard, who joins JJ and Alex every week. We'll jam a little bit on what he had to say about how some of the things went in Houston, but also how they get ready for BYU. So stay right here with us. More to go around the corner. It is 1st and 12. Happy Sunday to you. And happy shopping. It's all brought to you by Macy's. Mitch will be right back. Let's do more right around the corner. 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone, and KSL News Radio.
The following is a presentation of KSL Sports. 1st and 12. A total roundup of BYU and Utah football and the expanded Big 12 Conference. Brought to you by Macy's Grocery Stores. Your hosts are Mitch Harper and Alex Kirry on KSL News Radio and the KSL Sports Zone.
I don't like Utah. In fact, I hate them. I hate everything about them. I hate their program. I hate their fans. I hate everything. So it felt really good to send those guys home. They didn't deserve it. It was our time, and it was our time to win. We deserved it. We played as hard as we could tonight, and it felt really good, again, to send them home, to get them out of here. So, game will always remember. I mean, I think the whole university and their fans and the organization is classless. I think, they threw beer on my family and stuff last year and did a whole bunch of nasty things, and I don't respect them, and they deserved it. They deserve it.
Oh, Mitch. Remember there was a time where I don't know, maybe we're going to get in trouble for playing that clip. There was a time where the terms holy war were unwelcome in this building. There were times when that clip right there was nowhere to be found in our archives because it was like, hey, we do not want to build this incivility up. I'm not for building the incivility, but I am a lover of history, all right, Mitch, and I know you are too. Yep. And so that was, of course, a moment. That was, of course, a big one in that one. We're talking all rivalry stuff. Next hour, we're going to kind of just go through some of the memories we've had inside this rivalry now that it's officially back as a conference matchup. It is 1st and 12. Alex Kirry, Mitch Harper. Mitch, let's talk a little bit about what the state of the Big 12 is. You've covered this conference, and we both have done this show now since BYU's been in the conference. This is our second year doing this program, so we dive deep into kind of everything going on behind the scenes as well as everything that's going on the field. And, of course, you do everything top to bottom when it comes to football and basketball. But second year for BYU in the Big 12 could not go any better. Obviously, they're undefeated. But why has the transition been so hard for Utah into the Big 12? And really, what's the state of this conference compared to the other Power 4 leagues that are out there?
I feel like this is the third best league in college football right now. I think it's better than the ACC. The SEC is still number one. I pause on that because the Big Ten's pretty dang good too. The Big Ten doesn't have the depth, I think, of the Big 12. I really don't believe that. I mean, the Big 12, what's interesting about this conference, and you saw it last week when Utah lost to Houston, is just that everyone's got this ability for one day to really look like a really good football team. Whereas, and maybe the bottoms are getting better in all the leagues across the board. We're kind of seeing that more and more as transfer portal and NIL. But I think one thing, too, is that these are heavily resourced programs. And then they play a style of football where you get a lot of different variety, and it's a lot of defense too in this conference. And it's still, I don't think there's an elite team that you say, man, that is a national championship good team in this league. It's just not. And look, BYU, I've been seeing them every step of the way. I don't look at them and say they're ready to win the title. I know the players have said they're shooting for that, and as they should, but I don't see that yet. But at the same time, in college football, no one's looked incredibly dominant so far this season, so why not this year? The Big 12 has got great coaches, and I think that for Kyle Whittingham and the transition of this league, it's hard to figure out, honestly, as far as what the struggles were. I mean, because it seems like on paper Utah had the talent to be right there in the upper tier from the get-go. I mean, I honestly thought the floor for Utah was 8-4, and they're already at 4 losses through 8 games. And so it's really shocking because I still feel like, because even Baylor AD Mac Rhodes, he said in the offseason that the football product's got to get better. Brett Yormark has said that. The football product has got to get better in the Big 12.
Well, like in what way? What's the thing that makes them different, I guess? Is it like, I mean, there used to be like a moment where they're like, hey, that's the 3 yards in a cloud of dust, kind of boring. And then it turned into like a lot of spread offenses. And then it turned into like, hey, the Big 12 doesn't play defense. Where's the league at right now when you say they're the third best? What's the thing that has to get them to that next level to be competing with a Big Ten and an SEC? Or is that not really a possibility because the brands are just too big in those conferences?
Honestly, I believe it's recruiting. And, I feel like that's one of the big detriments I think a lot of the AP pollsters turn to when it comes to ranking these teams, is that they just kind of like in their head, would that team or would that logo fare well against that one? And I think a lot of people just default to the recruiting rankings. And look, as someone who subscribes immensely to recruiting rankings and is a big believer in those, I agree. Like, those are going to more times than not win out when it comes to national titles. But the thing is that the Big 12's got this amazing ability to where they have this, they get these, mid 3-star prospects or high-end 3-stars, and they turn them into 5-star players. You look across the board in this league where I point to someone like an Isaiah Glasker at BYU, where he was a low-end 3-star prospect out of Bingham High School, wide receiver, safety, and you mean to tell me if that guy didn't go to the portal after this year, he wouldn't have dozens of Power 4 opportunities because he's 6'5", an incredible athlete. He's just got the build where that's what makes this league good. And I don't think enough media, when they put together their rankings, understand that. And that's a testament to the coaching that's in this league, that they've got this ability to take on, the 45th ranked recruiting class, and by the end of its cycle, 3 or 4 years in, that becomes a group where, man, there was about, 5 or 7 NFL guys in that class. And that just doesn't get credited enough, I think, in the Big 12, because the starting point for them is always behind the 8 ball. The starting point in the AP preseason polls, the recruiting rankings, it's always far behind the SEC Big 10. So weeks upon weeks and months of narrative building, and then it's like you're fighting that battle. And that's where you hope the playoff rankings. I'm very fascinated to see what this tone-setting playoff rankings this week is going to be on Tuesday, because, man, if they rank BYU higher than expected, that could be a real image boost, I think, for the Big 12, because we just really don't know how they're going to view a 12-team playoff rankings. But if they got BYU at, say, 13, man, that's just going to be an ultimate image killer for the Big 12. It's unfortunate because it's not fair. It's just, there's good football in this.
Yeah, and I think you're going to get BYU and Iowa State. There's going to be some version of those, those guys in those first rankings where they're going to shake out. It's going to be interesting to see how they do it. But at the same time, like, okay, so are the college football – it's going to be interesting on this first one. At the College Football Playoff Committee, will have the guts to put 2 Big 12 teams up there in that first set of rankings. And it's early, so maybe they'll just be like, hey, look, we'll throw them a bone early. We'll see what the Big 12 can do, and until proven otherwise, because as it stands, like you can't say that an undefeated BYU team is the same as like an undefeated, even Pitt. You know what I mean? Like, there's no way that they should be compared in those same conversations. They shouldn't be. BYU should get more respect. Iowa State should get more respect. And, it's interesting to see the projections. I'm interested to see how – my gut tells me that they're going to be – because they don't – well, you tell me. How do they rank them? Do they guess on who the conference champion is going to be, or do they just do a numeric rank, and then by the end of the season they have to put in a 1, 2, 3, 4 seed with the conference champions? How do they do it in this first rollout?
So it will just be a top 25 ranking, and there was actually a webinar this past week with the playoff committee.
How to interpret their findings? It's like how to translate the college football playoff committee.
So this week will just be the rankings, and then it'll just be a top 25 poll. They tear it down, and every week. So what it is this week after the games are played, after this week, and then BYU, Utah, and all the games will be played. They'll just tear it down and rebuild it again. Probably in their Irving, Texas headquarters, and build it up in some hotel suite.
The Gaylord Hotel in Grapevine, Texas.
They'll build it up again, and then it'll just be a top 25. And then you can through the top 25 rankings. So if you've got BYU at number 8, but they're the third highest ranked conference champion, they would be the 3 seed. And if Miami's number 9 behind BYU, they would be the 4 seed if they're the 4th highest ranked champion. So that's how it'll be. As far as rankings go on that front. And it'll be interesting to see because, if there was the computer metrics, there's a lot of old BCS models that would say BYU's the 7th or 8th best team in college football right now, yet the AP Top 25 last week had them at 9. Then this bye week, we'll see where they're at coming up here.
Yeah, what's funny is that's what's really funny about the AP poll is like, hey, if you don't play that week, you actually might get dinged, which is weird because they're already 8-0, and that's what's fascinating to me. See how this thing's going to shake out and what the first rankings are going to be. The good news for BYU is that it's early enough in the process that as long as they win, if they beat Utah, and then if they come back home and beat Kansas, and they're 10-0, let's say, which is a wild thing to consider. 10-0 BYU, at that point you're going to have more SEC teams kind of eating their own. Same thing with the Big Ten. And I think you're going to see BYU move up the same way that Utah has done, right, in the past, which is just like, hey, they're winning. We can't do anything else except for just keep putting them higher than the teams that are losing in front of them. And so
BYU's got to get, if they want to be in a position where, they could – get in as an at-large, they got to get to the Big 12 title game as an undefeated because I think that's the key. If you lose a game in regular season, I think sadly they will get dinged. Because,
if they lose again in the Big 12 championship game, they'll be like, well, it's a 2-loss Big 12 team versus a 2-loss SEC team. You're not going to let them in, are you? And it's like, geez.
Yeah, they won't let them in, I would assume. So I think that's going to be critical when it comes to maybe having an at-large potential for BYU. But it's going to be interesting. But I do love what this playoff has created because it's just the storylines, the drama. I mean, it's huge. It's immense stuff, and it's great for college football. And to think that college football wants to maybe change it again before this thing even starts is just crazy to me.
Right.
Brett Yormark said a couple weeks ago that the playoffs should not be changed. That was his stance. But it's like, does he have the power? Does he have the voice to actually make that happen? Because it just feels like the SEC and Big Ten are just continuing to consume the narrative more and more. These TV networks are leaning into them more than ever before. I mean, BYU Utah gets an 8-15 spot with BYU as an undefeated team and in the top 10 of the rankings. Like, right. How does that
and
that
the best
work?
rivalry game in the conference currently, as a brand, you know what I mean? So it is wild that they that's the kind of treatment they get. Let's take another break. We'll come back. When we do, let's roll out a little bit of our conversation we had with Utah running back Mekhi Bernard this week on JJ and Alex and how they're prepping. I mean, they're just as much reeling about that Houston loss and trying to figure out and get their footing with that, and then trying to turn that corner and prepare for BYU. It's a lot to ask, but we'll talk to Utah's offensive captain, Mekhi Bernard, right around the corner. Stay with us. It's 1st and 12. It's all brought to you by Macy's. the freshest fruits and vegetables and all of your favorite local brands as well. Everything you expect from Macy's. They bring you first and 12. Happy shopping. We'll take the break here. We'll come back. We got more to go. Stay with us on KSL News Radio and on the KSL Sports Zone.
JJ and Alex are deep in Utah strategy and reaction. What the Utes did right and what they need to do better. JJ and Alex, Monday from 3 to 6 on the KSL Sports Zone.
Welcome back into First and 12 here on KSL News Radio and the KSL Sports Zone. Mitch Harper, Alex Kirry with you. It's officially rivalry week. I mean, it's been kind of building up now since last week with the bye, but now it's here. The rivalry is on, and it's 8-0 BYU versus 4-4 Utah, just as we all expected. A team fighting for bowl eligibility with an undefeated team vying for the playoff. It's exactly how we predicted, and
it is what we predicted, just not those in that order.
Exactly. And this show, First and 12, every single week, brought to you by Macy's. Get the freshest fruits and vegetables from your local farms and favorite local brands. Macy's. Happy shopping every single week. You can listen to every single day, weekday. You can listen to Alex on JJ and Alex on the KSL Sports Zone, 3 to 7 on the Zone. And every week, Alex, you catch up with Mekhi Bernard, and he was pretty candid this week about the challenges in front of this Utah team and how they can get this fixed as they get ready for BYU.
What are you guys doing this week to kind of, I guess, digest what happened in Houston?
We flushing it. We gotta flush it. You can't let these bad games and bad vibes stick around. We know what we want to do this weekend or next weekend, I should say. So we just got to keep going. We're fired up about this, and now it's just we wanna be able to spoil other people's season. We haven't had a good one, but that's okay because we still got stuff to play for.
When you guys sit down and talk, as a team, and you say, "Hey, let's forget about that last one," I would assume also there'd be some things you go back to and you say, "Okay, there are some things." I know last week when we chatted with you, you're like, execution-wise, there was stuff that we had to go through and correct. Was there some of that this week from the execution standpoint, or was it just like, look, we're starting it over. It's officially game prep for BYU and getting all that, everything else behind us and just going straight forward and getting ready to play BYU?
Everything behind us, straightforward, play BYU. This is the biggest game in the state of Utah, so we got to be prepared. We got to come out prepared, and it's a good thing we got a bye week so we can do that.
I know in order for you guys to get a win against BYU, you got to have better quarterback play, and we saw what happened in the game with Isaac going to the bench and Brandon Rose coming in, and Kyle Whittingham said on Tuesday that they're going to split the reps during the bye week. The situation with the quarterback, how do you support that? What do you do as a captain to try to help those guys get ready no matter what happens one way or the other?
Just making sure they're just doing their job. I mean, they're splitting reps or whatever, but just making sure they're doing their job each play and not having the mindset of trying to, beat each other out. Like, you just got to play your game and, have fun doing it and just make the right decisions and whatnot, and everything will come to fruition.
Mekhi, when you have these tough trips and you're coming back from them, how do you as a leader help your guys kind of make sure that they don't just get caught up in the last 4 games? And because you've taken that role on of being a leader so well that a lot of guys lean to you and they listen to you. So what's the conversation you have with guys when you're like, hey, here's how we actually? There's one thing to say, look, we can't get down. It's another to actually do it. How do you help those guys?
Just continue on being the vocal leader, making sure, everybody's spirits stay up. It's a long season, still got 4 games left, believe it or not, and we just got to keep going. We got to keep fighting, and, we're here for one another. And, you don't get the same team every single year, so, you got to take it with a grain of salt and make sure everybody know that, hey, maybe you're not going to see some of these guys next year. You got some seniors leaving, whatnot. This is the last few games we could play together, so let's just have fun doing it.
Mekhi's as outspoken as it gets as like a college football player, but he's pretty hesitant to really kind of – I mean, those guys feel like they know some of the things that need to get fixed, but they also have a young quarterback who the last thing you want to do is go after that kid who's been put in a bad circumstance, right? I mean, the reality is that it's a bad spot for them to be in. and it's a weird spot for them to be in. It's just, and this group of seniors, I mean, they had last year where they go 8-4, right? And they go to a bowl game playing Northwestern. They lose to Northwestern in the bowl game, and people went, well, yeah, it's because they didn't have. You win 8 games and go to a bowl game even without Cam Rising the entire season and the pig farmer at the helm. And so then you go, the hope of the next year was, well, you get everything fixed. And the reality is that it's not. I think we've been so used to the consistency that Utah's brought and the consistency that Kyle Whittingham has brought. It didn't matter what year it was or who was in there. You could plug guys in, and they bought into the culture. And right now, I'm not going to say the culture's hanging by a thread, but it certainly feels in a weird spot for that Utah team. I haven't seen the fan base this despondent in a couple decades, man.
Yep. My wife, after that that Houston game for Utah, she's just like, I've never seen Utah play like this. And it's just, and I'm not just saying that because like she's known Utah football. There's kind of like a generation now for 20 years where they don't play like this. So this is foreign territory for Utah. Yes, in the 70s and 80s, this was kind of what Utah was, up and down, and even a little bit with Ron McBride. But this is under Whittingham. This is not what they do. They always have that next man up, the identity, and the physicality is shown up in stretches, but still not like finishing the job, finishing the tackles. It's the little things where Utah was always just sound on that front. They haven't been that, and that's where you then go, is everyone dialed into the culture? Is everyone you're wondering, how does this operation that was consistently, operating at a high level where, at worst they're losing 4 games in a season, how is it suddenly becoming where you don't even know if you're going to a bowl game? Because Utah's stretch, BYU, Colorado, Iowa State, that is a gauntlet here in the Big 12. Suddenly that schedule that we thought was so easy got really tough quick for the Utes, and it's coincides with fighting for their bowl eligibility lives.
I had Utah losing a couple of games this year in my preseason, kind of predictions, and I said Iowa State was going to be one of those games, and I got absolutely killed because people were like, we don't lose home games ever. Thanks, bro. Thanks, buddy. And, now you look at that and you go, oh, boy, that Iowa State game. By the way, Iowa State is going to be they have to be locked in all the way through if they're going to have any chance to be able to get to that Big 12 championship game and then put themselves into that college football playoff discussion. So they're going to come into Salt Lake with freaking bells on, man, because they have to get that win. And Utah is at a point now where they're like, well, we don't know what to think about this season. And so that's going to be a really, really tough game. And then suddenly the games that BYU has left are wildly gettable. Like, it is insane to think where this was and how crazy this has been. And I know I use the words crazy and insane like every week a lot. And somebody pointed out that I say those words a lot. But guess what? That's the only way I can describe the season. That's how wild it's been. All right. We'll take another break. We'll come back. Hour number 2, we're going to dive into some memories of the rivalry. Mitch's mind is like a steel trap. Mine is a little bit more like a sieve, but I do recall quite a few things over the past 20 years of covering BYU football and, of course, this rivalry game. So we'll come back. It is 1st and 12, 97.5 the KSL Sports Zone and KSL News Radio.